Foster, and today we're going to talk about Through the Mist, a new book. We're going to talk about Chapter 1, Coming Through the Mist. Before I begin, let us have a short prayer. Dear Jesus, Lord, Savior, brother, leader of the earth and the areas of heaven surrounding the earth, and our best friend and our best guide that we can have, please help us open our hearts, open our minds, explore the spirit world, explore the other side. Let us come together with our spirit mentors, our friends and family who are on the other side as they try and help us. Let us come together and work towards our goal of becoming a better spirit. Amen. So today is exciting because we're starting Through the Mist, and this is a wonderful book. I've read through most of it, and it's extremely interesting. It is by a spirit who wishes to remain nameless. So we will respect that. And let me get into it right now. But first, let me, for those who want to understand and get into Spiritism more, understand Spiritism, understand the other side, understand who spirits are, because you are a spirit, you are an immortal spirit. You can go to my website, nwspiritism.com, download for free the PDF version, Spiritism 101, the third revelation. Again, that's also in French. It's also in Kindle, paperback, and in Audible format if you so choose. But you can download it for free. It's PDF. And I have all my other books on my site, NW Spiritism, on the right-hand navigation bar. So if you're interested in what I'm saying today, please explore more, because the more you understand who you are, what you are, why you're here, what you're going through, the less stress and the happier you shall be. Okay, let us start. Now, this is for the reader, or to the reader, from the author. I heard within my spirit home a well. If only one could come and could tell the tale of his experience on that other side, could rend the mist, could fling the portals wide, that we may see, might understand, might know. The agony disturbed me, and my heart said, Go. Love cheers me on, but ignorance resists the power by which I hand this through the mist. And that's the first written notes from the author in the book. And this is the recorders. This is the medium, explaining how he came by this, psychographing this work. And he says, I have no desire to add anything to the following story more than a brief explanations of its origin and my connection with the same. It was Christmas Eve, and I was busily engaged with some annuals lying on my table when a stranger, uninvited, unannounced, entered my room while the door was shut. His presence did not disturb me, since I had entertained such visitors before. So, pointing to a seat, I bade him welcome and asked the purpose of his coming. He then explained to me a desire he had long cherished, and asked if I would aid him in its consummation. As soon as his mind comprehended the fact that he had passed the grave, a yearning possessed him to find some means of coming back and telling how men erred in their conception of that life beyond. At first he feared he had no power to break the silence of the tomb, but with experience came the knowledge of the omnipotence of love, by which the lips of death could be unsealed, the proof of which was granted in our conversation. He desired me to write what he should dictate, then give the story to the world. And before I go on, I have a link to the PDF that I'm reading right now, and it links to the file section of my Facebook site. And so you can download it yourself if you'd like to read it. Again, this is also on PDF. How could I answer no? Was not I in common with every human being, seeking for that knowledge he had the power to give? Therefore, I did not hesitate to take my pen. I soon discovered his recital, though unorthodox, threw a flood of light upon the Bible teaching, clearing clouds of doubt away and reconciling passages therein I could not understand before. And this is exactly what happened to me, if I may digress from the narrative, when I discovered Spiritism. There are a lot of passages that I did not fully understand or I understood incorrectly, and Spiritism throws a light on it all. It gives the background of what Jesus was actually talking about. And a lot of things what Jesus said were not just kind of fuzzy parables. A lot of them were just like total truth, but we said, no, that can't be. So we tried to turn him into something else. I'll carry on. He came to me a stranger, but I soon learned to love him and awaited his return with impatience every morning. Now, when he has ceased his record for the present, I look upon the seat whereon he sat so many hours as being in some mysterious manner halfway through the mist. In sending this forth in obedience to his wish, let me append the prayer he breathed when he at last left me. May God, the Father of the souls of all men, bless this effort of a yearning heart to lift a portion of the weight of ignorance from the shoulders of his brethren in the flesh, and grant that the light of its truth may be a lamp unto their feet in coming through the mist. To this I add Amen. This is from Robert Lees in May 1898. And I don't think I will read the preface. Okay, now we'll start with chapter 1. Let's see, make sure everybody can see this correctly. Yes, that looks pretty good. Chapter 1, Coming Through the Mist. In my earth life, I was called a misanthrope. This is a strange admission with which to break my silence, but being now beyond the consequences to which such frankness might lead, I have no reason, even though I had the will, to speak with less reserve. If any apology be demanded for the pleasant task I've undertaken, let it be found in the ceaseless well to which I have referred to in my preface to these pages. Is my statement true in that respect? I bid you turn that question inwards. Ask your own heart, and I will be content to take the answer, merely adding that you, as you are, so is all mankind. Pardon me 1 or 2 sentences, a necessary explanation of myself before I carry you across the borders. Sorry, I went too far. Of the other world. My life was overshadowed by the consequences of some prenatal trouble of which I knew nothing, save the phantom remaining to haunt me, and that it robbed me of a mother's guiding hand. My father was an inflexible Calvinist, with a mode of life as carefully arranged as an architectural elevation, while its working details were as rigorously insisted upon as an elder of the Presbyterian Church, with a banking account of sufficient magnitude to allow him to live a life of most unquestioning faith. He spent all the years of his pilgrimage free from the shadow of reproach. My brother and sister were not so strictly inclined, and their almost open rebellion as they grew by no means tended to soften my father's character. For myself, I never received from nor extended to any member of the household any sympathy. No one ever spoke to me of my mother. Her name, in fact, was seldom mentioned. But I always felt that had she lived, we should have been all in all to each other. But she was gone, and I was left alone. Books were my only companions, the poets my greatest favorites. My earliest recollections are of the religious baby farm to which I had been entrusted, whose managers I learned to loathe for their duplicity and hypocrisy they habitually practiced there. With a naturally morbid mind, the shadow of some unknown wrong above me, and a soul shrinking from the appearance of deceit, I soon learned to hate those who did not hesitate to lie in the act and prayer, and plead with God to grant success to infamy. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from people who've in their youth completely turned away from religion because of all the hypocrisy and duplicity that they notice of those around them. Very sad, is it not? But a lot of them come back because they knew there was something there. They knew there was more than just the people around it. Oh, and we have a comment which I'd like to show. One of the greatest books ever written. Oh, yes, I love this book. It is well worth it, and so I hope people download it themselves and read it. Okay, let me carry on. By these things I was gradually led to draw all my comfort from books, and to entertain a great aversion to any fellowship with those about me. I was naturally of a religious turn of mind, but preferred to solve its questions by the light of my own reason and the plain teaching of the Bible as I could comprehend them. A practical acquaintance with the public worship of the various sects only confirmed my original idea of there being much more of form and fashion than solid worship or spirit in them all, and therefore in this, as in everything else, I learned to rely upon myself alone, and to trust the leniency and justice of a righteous God in respecting the errors resulting from my honest endeavor to do his will according to the light within me. So it's very interesting. Already he internally, intuitively knew that his idea of a righteous God, that the form and fashion wasn't important. It's more as what's internal to you, and you're learning to love. Socrates is one of the first to, of course, he was killed for this, to tell everyone. This is about 400 years before Christ, that it doesn't matter, as much of offering you want to give to the gods. Socrates usually said God, but people interpret that as gods. Socrates knew better, because the gods don't want your your offerings. They want you to become a better person. That is the best offering you could give them. And also, and the reason he was really killed is because he argued that might wasn't right, which was pretty, that was kind of the way it was back in the ancient days. Is if you had more power, you were right. It's just like here in our current culture. If you have more money, you must be smarter than everybody else. Of course, that's not true either. Okay, let me. I learned to rely upon myself alone and to trust to the leniency and justice of a righteous God in respecting the error resulting from my honest endeavor to do his will according to the light within me. Nevertheless, I had companionship and sweet communion in my worship. After this manner, led by some influence, to me nothing less than an inspiration, I would find myself in one of the courts and alleys so numerous in the east of London, where vice, poverty, and wretchedness most abound, where help, though urgently needed, is seldom met with, where the inhabitants are not learned in metaphysics, but hunger for the bread of practical sympathy. Among such outcasts and fallen members of our common humanity, I always found I had a sermon to preach which was comprehended in every part, a gospel to proclaim that they would gladly hear, a seed to sow which brought forth fruit 60 or 100-fold. Let me answer this question because this is a good question. This is from Katir. Many times I wonder what type of gods require offerings. Well, we have been influenced by low spirits who want offerings, and this goes all the way back to Bel. They want offerings of blood, right? Remember all the human sacrifices throughout ancient times and the Aztecs. I mean, there's many cults of that, and they would want violence and those type of things. Now, there's other offerings too, but a lot of it has to do with blood and torture, unfortunately. So those lower spirits that some at those point in times, those types of priests were plugged into. They were probably mediums, but they were mediums with lower spirits. That's what those spirits wanted. That was people don't understand what a upward trek that was for Jesus to come and Socrates first, right, and others people too, but and then the Jews kind of stood alone for a long time, saying, "No, God doesn't want human sacrifices." He doesn't, and you've seen throughout the Old Testament all the time. People kind of went back to that, right? And then it was an upward climb. It's not easy. Okay, let me carry on. If the church was right, and I last found out that I was wrong, the gratitude which these poor unfortunates showed for the interest I took in them would be sufficient to make the pains of my punishment not only bearable, but welcome. There would be plenty of good people in heaven to ensure the happiness of every soul who should gain an entrance to those streets of gold. I had no voice to sing. And if the religious conversation on earth were fair specimens of what would be the standard there, the goodiness would have no charm for me. Forced in such a society without any congenial work to do, the place would have no interest, no attraction for me. It was not my idea of heaven. Consequently, I did not want it. So this is where he's saying that this is the kind of the popular idea of heaven is this ethereal Elysian plane, I should say, an ethereal place, cloudy. You drift, you play the harp. I'm exaggerating a bit, and you do nothing, and you just pray and all day. And he said, no, that doesn't sound good to me. And as in the spirits book, when they were asked, Allan Kardec asked the question of spirits, what is heaven like? And they said, well, heaven's work. If heaven was just eternal leisure, then that would be hell. I don't know about you, but if I go on vacation, some people love a beach vacation. They do nothing but lay on the beach for a week at a time. I can do that for like an hour or two and I'm done. I want intellectual stimulation. I want to work. So, but all depends, what you like best. And of course, this is what the spirit said. He said, "No, he wants something where he does things. He will find out this is what he finds." I'll carry on. It would be very different with the poor cast adrift into that other place. For if the church was right, the division would be made more upon those lines than any other. The rich build the temples, keep them out of financial difficulties, are constant at the means of grace, make them fashionable, provide everything necessary to worship God in the beauty of architecture and ritual, while they generously subscribe towards the salary of the minister, paying in every way for their salvation. It is but right and honest they should meet with their reward. But the poor, who have to work long hours with nothing to give, scarcely one suit to wear, and that unpleasantly suggestive by the odors of the workshop, with their vulgar habits and loud voiced song, for whose accommodations the whitewashed, ill-lighted, draughty mission hall is provided, have no right to expect such an abundant entrance as those who contribute better while they live, and can be drawn in a four-horse hearse when they take their departure. And we see that today, and even today there are people who barely have two changes of clothes, one change of clothes. I know I've been in Brazil in some of the very poor sections, and it's better than it used to be. But um, there's a lot of poor people, and but they're some of the nicest people who will give you, just like the lady who gave a little bit of money in the temple, and then Jesus said she gave more, as I'm paraphrasing, as like a percentage of what she had than all these other rich people. And I've met with that many times, and it's a wonderful thing to say. And these are the people; these are the unheralded heroes of society, those who give when they have very little to give. And in fact, later on in this book, there will be a very interesting passage where all these spirits come down to meet this man who comes to heaven, and he was amazed that he was celebrated because he said, "Well, I had nothing to give, but I won't give away this." But it's very revealing. For this reason, the poor have always had my sympathy. When I thought upon the subject, I often felt as if I should be glad to find the pearly gates shut upon me, if by that means I could be some little consolation to the multitudes in hell. So here is a spirit who, right now, he's a physical person, as he's talking about how he felt when he was a physical person. He has the exact attitude of what heaven wants, which is service above everything else, service and intellectual curiosity. And think about that. Why wouldn't heaven want that? Why would heaven want some person that can, pay the minister and make sure that the seats are, comfortable and there's gold in the church, right? That's just transitory physicalness. The physical world, everything decays. But in heaven, your attitude and your character and your love goes on forever because you are an immortal spirit. You go on forever. But in heaven, it's people have this thought that God maybe working together with Jesus. Depends how they think. Is they just have everything figured out, which they kind of do. But let me go on. They have everything figured out, everything planned, and they have this tremendous capacity to give orders of every minutia there is. That's not how it works. While God may know the whole future, what God does is, and what Jesus does too, just like you do for a child, you let them figure out things on their own. And we are given the space to make, even in the spirit world, to make advancements that will be used on Earth 50 to 100 years later. There's research, and you think, so, well, why do you need to do research about Earth? Well, the Earth, God allows each planet to be somewhat different. So the variations of animals and plants all have to be configured and customized to that environment. And so there are whole teams of people helping modify their DNA, helping them evolve in a superior manner. So there's work to be done. There's whole cities, and just like any cities, there's water, there's transportation, all of this. And then there's also things like reincarnation pavilions. There are so many jobs in cities. There's even a defense force when they're down at these lower levels, where kind of inferior spirits may sometimes try to attack or try to move that city out because too many people come to that city and deplete the people that are part of that lower uh, area, that lower little city or outpost. And the other thing is, it also says that the lower zone, which we can call like a purgatory and there's no hell, there's no eternal hell, but there's organization there, right? So why wouldn't there be organization? Just like in a prison, is the prisoners kind of organize themselves. The guards are there to make sure that they don't step out of bounds, but they don't tell the prisoners what to do all the time. A lot of it's self-policing. In the same way is on in those lower zones. There's they organize themselves, but this is the main thing. There's no such thing as Satan. Jesus Christ is in charge of heaven and the lower zones and hell. He's in charge. He and his ministers decide who is reincarnated, when they're reincarnated, what their trials and tribulations are for those people down there. Now, when you go higher in heaven, you work with your spirit mentors and you talk with them. You say, okay, I need to work on this fault here. I need to change this one character of attribute that I have. You work with them as you get more and more mature and responsible. So are you then consulted with, and you can consult with them, decide what you want your life to be and the trials and tribulations you go through. We will start leaving all that behind as we go from a planet of atonement where we are now, where we pay for our past wrongs, to a planet of regeneration. And then we'll have more of our planned life will be in more consultation, and it will be of more expanded intellectual things instead of changing our character, because we'll have little character changes, I'm sure, to make, but it will be mostly to be for us to be a more well-rounded spirit. Okay, let me carry on. For this reason, the poor always had my sympathy. When I thought upon the subject, I often felt I should be glad to find the pearly gates shut upon me, if by that means I could be some little consolation to the multitudes in hell. So I read that already. It was wicked, blasphemous to feel so. So the vicar once told me, but it was constitutional, part of my unfortunate malady, and he found it useless to attempt or change my mind. Wise person. I've heard that a lot of times when enough people think you're wrong, that's when you know you're right. When enough people say, no, that's not correct, that's when you're correct. Not always. You got to really discern and make sure that clears through that filter of your conscience. I'll carry on. I could never understand the righteousness of poverty here and damnation there, or the logical sequence of riches here and salvation there. It was not according to my reading of the Bible or the teaching of Jesus in the parable of Dives and Lazarus, as I understood the English language. It may have been a defect in my power of analogy, but if so, I held to the delusion. It was one evening when on my way to visit some of these uncared for people that the great change overtook me. I was walking along a crowded footpath, engaged in the contemplation of the lights and shadows visible on the faces of passers-by, when I heard a scream, and then saw a child in deadly peril among the horses in the road. Now remember, this is 18. He wrote this, dictated in 1898, so this is before there was not really cars in the road. It was, you know, her carriages and horses. He was not far away, so bounding forward with no thought but for his safety, I reached and dragged him from his hazardous position, then turned and something touched me. I clasped the boy more firmly and stepped forward. The noise ceased. Vehicles and street faded away, as if some great magician had waved his hand. The darkness disappeared, and I was lying upon a grassy slope in an enchanted land. Now, Spiritism will tell you. So he and the boy, most probably, were completely gifted a complete loss of memory to the act of dying. And this also is reported in Spiritism, is that for those Christians in the Circus Maximus during the early Roman times when they were eaten by lions and killed in horrible ways, that many of them, I don't know if all of them, many of them was were rescued even before they were quote unquote the you know chopped up or whatever, the final blow that killed them, and they were given the gift of being numb to that, and they were being taken already, their spirit was being taken already to someplace in heaven, and therefore they didn't have that feeling of torture. It was like, that lion was right at you, and you looked at the lion, and then everything went black. Now, I don't know if this is the case for everyone, right? But I think for what I heard of for many is they didn't have that. Yeah. So let me yeah. Although Frederick and Francesca had different experiences upon passing this, yes, how loving their souls were. It all depends. There's some people who have that, and then and some people don't. And it says, well, I better read this whole thing because I have a podcast I go with. Although Frederick, Opera, and Francesca had different experiences upon passing due to their soul conditions, how loving their souls were. To me, the spirit world described by both, and how our Father has made his laws correlate. Yes. There's all different experiences. And that's why I said not everybody. And some people wanted that last painful moment, maybe because they'd given other people that last painful moment. I'm not sure, but yes, that is absolutely true. And then other spirits will describe um, other conditions, and this is why, it's, if you try to go through what some spirits say, and this is why I go through a lot of things. Everyone has their own point of view, and if you read like I have read quite a few near-death experiences, everyone has their own point of view and their own interpretation of events. And then when you read different books by spirits sitting down, they have their own point of view. And like just the last book I read, a wanderer in the spirit land, he had his point of view, and what he saw is what he believed he saw. And I said most of the stuff he was correct, but then I said, well, if you look at upon it this way, this is what he thought it was. I think it was more like that, and that was, my whole series on that last book, and that's why I love reading these publicly PDFs, because once is that you can get them and you can read them and do your own interpretation, but also you can read with me instead of me just reading and you have to listen. So, but there's for every death there's just an infinite number of of different variations that could happen, and for every birth, I mean, the more you get into spiritism, you see how much work there was in a birth. Now, in a birth for someone who came from the lower zone and wouldn't make an impact on Earth, well, that's Usually it's just pretty self-explanatory. That's the way it works. But for a birth from someone who has lots of friends in heaven, who maybe has a mission, that there are spirits around them that will. And this is very. I just read this. I reread this book the other day. Is they will actually during the time of conception, they'll actually pick the sperm that will win. They said naturally there's not just the smartest or the best, little swimmer, but the one that's the most magnetically attracted. But what they for a spirit that comes with, has a lot of credit in heaven or comes with a mission, the spirits around the mother, they will select who wins that race, and they will help along with the mother. They'll help create that mental form upon which that fetus will grow into. Now, there's a lot of things that are limited by the DNA inheritance, right? But they can also make small modifications to the DNA itself. That's how involved the spirit world is with many of us. And they will watch that child very closely for like 7 years, because that child's tied to their mother through blood for 7 years, and only after 7 years does their blood actually completely lose the influence of their mother, and they're on their own. But I thought that was interesting. That shows you how close. And of course, on the other side, if you are of a significant high level, right? At least you have been trying your best and you've got friends in heaven, you'll have friends helping you get out of your physical body. This is why when Jesus said, let the dead take care of the dead, he wasn't saying, that's not important. We need to do this. He was actually saying a truism. Nope, the spirits will help that person get out of their body. The physical body is just temporary. Of course, he couldn't reveal everything. People would think he was totally crazy. And what he revealed was hard enough. Remember, the spirit world, the Spiritism tells us that we're told according to what we can understand, according to the culture and technology at the time. In the Old Testament, there's many cruel things. There's actually cruel things in the New Testament too, according to what our culture is today. And so that's why Spiritism says this: the things that are for charity, fraternity, love, those are eternal messages. But messages that's in the Old Testament as go attack that town and kill everybody, and you're going to be punished if you don't kill everybody. There was a reason for that, of which we don't fully understand. And I believe, in my opinion, it was starting to get people to get to the habit of doing what the spirit world told them, in order for them to start following their orders, because that's how things were back then, right? The Jewish tribe were full of slaves who had this habit of following orders, and they were trying to say, okay, you're going to follow the orders in this, and you're going to follow orders in the nicer, more elevated things. That's just my thesis. Could be totally wrong. So that's why it's so interesting. That's why it's so interesting with the spirit. I wish he had a name so I could say his name, how smart he was, and how he intuitively knew what he did. But now he was helped. Let me get to this before I go on. What is happening with so many women pro-choice? Too many souls unable to be born and killed so painfully. Is there something in Spiritism about this? And the answer is yes. Now, let me tell you right away, before I encountered Spiritism, I was pro-choice. And in fact, there are people today say, well, there's in the embryo, there's no soul in that till like the Texas law, the heartbeat law. Well, this is what Spiritism says. And this was, in fact, in the book, the Missionaries of Light, the third book in the series by Andre Luis, psychographed by Chico Xavier. As soon as that conception happens, the soul, the spirit, who's going to be the son or daughter of the parents, and that soul usually meets the parents beforehand. That soul kind of hangs onto the mother and then shrinks into the form, and shrinks so small it shrinks into that embryo. So that soul is attached to the embryo, and then and that soul helps in their own mind, forms, gives the mold for that embryo to grow, as well as from the spirit world and the mother may have influences upon that. Now, for all the children that die through artificial stuff. Oh, okay, yeah. So here we go. There, you just gave what I said. So you've already independently proven that. I gave past life regressions to people whose moms tried to abort them. The soul was there already at conception and before. So let's say it happens that a child dies before they're born or right after they're born. Any child that dies is taken to heaven and raised in heaven. Interesting, is it not? Because we're told that I've just said, hey, we're immortal spirits. We've had past lives. So why would that child? Why wouldn't that child just bring back up what he or she was? And I believe, and I don't know, that I believe that this is a type of a reset for spirits that um, have just not grown in previous lives, and they need to be raised in the spirit world so that they can get at least that influence of being a nicer, more positive spirit. Some children, when they die, is told by this information spirits, they will revert right back to where they were because they're on a mission. They're here to die young, to help influence the parents, show the parents all these type of things. But many children are raised in heaven, and in fact is what was said by one spirit, is that they're the children that kind of die before they ever get out of that birth canal, before they ever kind of get that influence of earth. They are raised and they're like special children, and they're just like the nicest people, but they're raised and they'll go to a different type of job. What type of job? It wasn't said, but they kind of go to a different type of mission than those who are raised, or those who had actually been, even if for a minute, have been exposed. They're like different type of children to the environment of earth. Interesting, is it not? Let me show you this one. So here it says, I've always been pro-life, and even after these regressions, even more. Yeah, I mean, that's when I read this, I go, oh, okay. Well, you can't, it reveals a lot. And then Katira also says, yes, I've heard that. Oh, this is from Cami, I'm sorry. Yes, I heard that, Katira, and I believe that the soul enters upon the second there is conception. And yes, and that is what Spiritism tells us. And then Katira says, and medical tests show that there's physical activity and reaction to pain from being a tiny fetus too. And there's not just physical pain, but there's the agony of these poor souls who wanted to achieve something in a physical life and then were not able to. Because each spirit, I mean, it's like a driver's license, if I use that horrible analogy. You don't have the right to drive. You have, you know, you have to earn that right, and you have the privilege to drive. You have to get a driver's license. The same thing with reincarnation. Each spirit, no, you don't like, oh, I want to reincarnate down. No, it doesn't work that way. It's the spirit world decides, and we're working with you when you're higher level of being reincarnated. And many spirits are lining up and want to be incarnated on Earth or other planets because that's how they're going to repair their character and personality so they can be elevated. So anyway, so if any woman out there has had even a natural miscarriage, that child is taken care of. And in fact, Jivao's mother met her. She had a daughter who she lost, I think, I forgot how many months naturally. And she met her daughter there. And the daughter was, they're raised and know who their mother is. And in fact, a lot of times the mother will be taken to the spirit world and interact with their child, even though they never kind of met them uh, physically on earth. So very interesting. It's different than what our culture says, and it's not a good thing. And then I'll say one more thing. I'll say one more thing about it. In the book No Solar, again, this is the first book in the Andre Louise series. Andre Louise was a spirit who was a very famous doctor in Rio at the time. I think his name was something Chega. He was the doctor that invented the cure for Chega disease. I could be wrong. I'm sure there's people here that know it more than I do. Please leave it in the comment section. And he was, a scientist, and he didn't really care that much for other people. He was a good guy, right? But he was just, he was focused. And he spent some time in lower zone. And he then went to No Solar, which is a city above Rio de Janeiro. And then he still wanted to help people. And he really started to understand everything that he was wrong about. And so the shows, and there's one episode in here where this woman came to the gates of No Solar and said, "Let me in." And he went there and with his kind of a spirit mentor and says, "Well, shouldn't we let her in? She's begging to be let in." And he goes, "No." He says, look at her closely. See all those dark spots on her? Those are times when she assisted in stopping a pregnancy prematurely. So there's a lot. Those poor people who don't know that. It's not easy. Okay, here's what is the book you mentioned before? Not No Solar, the other one. Yeah. So the first book in the Andre Louise series is No Solar. And in fact, if you look up Andre Louise on my site, nwspiritism.com, Andre Louise books, I think I go through the order of the books. But there's No Solar. The second book is The Messengers. And the third book, the one I'm talking about, is Missionaries of the Light. Missionaries of the Light. And it talks about that, and it goes through the whole birth process and what they do. And very revealing. It might be something anyone here would be interested in. And those are a wonderful series of books. If you go to my site and you click on the picture of Allan Kardec, like I have up here in the upper corner, it will take you to the FEB bookstore. And they'll have all the books by Andre Louise. You can order it through them, or you can also order, of course, for your local bookstore or Amazon. But it will have a lot of Spiritist books there on the FEB websites. That's why I put a connection. So you just click on his picture up on the top, and you'll find that book. Okay. Now I apologize. Because after I talk a while, I forget where I was at, but I think I know. Okay, so he was lying on a grassy slope in enchanted land. So he just he's there, and it's probably like waking up from a minor operation. Like, oh, you may not even known you were out, right? Now I'll start reading. Neither did all the changes lie in our surroundings. Few people would have been enamored of the ragged child I rushed to save, with his shoeless feet, matted hair, and unwashed face. But the angel I found lying upon my breast would have driven an artist into raptures. For myself, in that instance, I had changed my morning suit for a loosely flowing robe, which somehow seemed to be part of myself. And though I was fully assured of my own individuality, I was curious to know what had taken place and by what means. In the interval of one solitary step, a transformation of such completeness had been effected. So the robe was probably your clothes, as you decide what clothes you want. But probably he was assisted by a spirit as he was taken from that area on earth where they took his spirit out and they gave him some sort of clothing, mind to mind. And of course, then the young boy was what he is, and as natural, not his physical appearance, as a young child who's innocent and a good kid. The lad, though, evidently conscious of the alteration, looked into my face with calm, laughing eyes, void of any trace of fear. Perhaps he expected me to give some explanation, but I needed that myself. Then he buried his head in my shoulder and fell asleep. I sat and nursed him, trying to answer the only question which occupied my mind: where are we? Now, a lot of times when children die and the spirit world helps them, other children help them come out, right? Because you know that children love other children, you know, more than they love adults or parents many times. And in one of the books by G. Val Owen, and I have that in my book, um, Heaven and Below, this child was dying, and he was dying in his mother's arms. And the spirits came and they said, "Oh, okay, this child's dying. Go get," and I forgot a very young spirit. It was a child himself. Go get so and so. And the child came. He said, and he talked to the child that they were just taking this other young girl out of her body. And he goes, "Oh, would you like to come with me?" And she goes, "Yes." Just as children, right? He goes, "Yeah, we're going to go to this wonderful place." And the parents were there, and then the child died, and then the mother and father were so sad. But then the father said, "Goes, I don't know what happened, but I heard them. I could hear in my mind the voice saying, 'Go get someone and help this child to go to heaven, and we'll take good care of her there.'" And then the mother says, "Oh my heavens!" Goes, "I saw spirits around me taking my daughter and taking her to a wonderful place." So this is how the spirit world works. I mean, because these were this couple, and then they described the couple that they were honest, loving couple, you know, poor, but until the spirit world says they didn't want them to be devastated by this, and many people would like say there is no God because they killed my child, right? And who can blame them for that? Sometimes and people ask me all the time, like, "Oh, my child died. Why would God let that happen?" Well, the answer is there's lots of reasons that a child will die young. Sometimes it's to uh, help the child just repair themselves. A lot of times when people with suicides and they die with their perispirit really badly damaged because they die prematurely and their perispirit wasn't ready to depart from the body. They have to go through a birth and they're alive maybe just for a short time, or they have a tough life the whole time. Depends on the circumstances. And they need that to repair the perispirit. Other times they're there just to have the parents experience that that grief and help them grow. Sometimes, as an example, and I know two examples of this. One is when the spirit Emmanuel, who was the spirit mentor for Chico Xavier, he was the spirit helping Chico Xavier when Chico Xavier was the medium. They had him live a short life. I think he died when he was around 2021, so he could learn modern Portuguese. So when he dictated books to Chico Xavier, he could dictate them in modern Portuguese. So a lot of times, young men and women will die at an early age, but there's a reason for that. They just wanted them to expose them to the current culture and language at the time. So when they come back again, they know it, or they're actually talking to people, right? So it's there are the chess pieces are done so far in advance that we're not sure why, but there's always a good reason. It's not for punishment. It's, especially for the young people who've never done anything wrong. And they say, "Oh, he died so young and they're such a good person." But, you should actually say they were lucky. They didn't have to go through all the horrible trials and tribulations. They went to somewhere where they're probably going to have a mission. So probably something's important that's going to happen for most of them, not all. I'm sure there's some of them make stupid choices and they die early. In fact, and one of the near death experiences, this woman was she kind of a near death, and she was like in this room, and she looked at everyone and said, "Oh, all these people just died." And then these three boys came in, and they're all like kind of goofy and stupid, making jokes. And then her, her spirit assistant was there, and she goes, "Well, what's those? What's going on with those guys?" Uh, they were drunk and they just died in a car accident. So that was their own fault. And but they didn't know they were dead yet. It was very interesting. So who knows? There's all sorts of reasons. But if there were really good kids and innocent, they'll be taken care of. We're all immortal. You will see whoever you loved again. Whoever you loved is still there in the spirit world, or there maybe could already be incarnated again somewhere on Earth. But you can see them when you're asleep, and if they're sleeping within the same proximate time zones, you can meet as a spirit. So let me. So he said, "Where are we?" So he was in a staging area where people who just came over would be. And he says, "I was reclining upon the grass of what can only be described as the auditorium of an immense but natural amphitheater, with the arena occupied by a multitude who appeared to be engaged in the reception of strangers, whom they were welcoming and congratulating. If only I could have understood it." So I will stop there. I will continue on with this chapter in our next Monday. I hope this is interesting to everybody. And before I go, if you'd like to understand the spirit realm more, understand who you are, what place you are, what is a spirit? Because you really should understand what you are as a spirit. You're immortal. You're here on Earth. What's Earth? I think the best way to describe it, and this is not how I've heard other people describe it, but this is kind of my interpretation, is we're in a simulator, like a flight simulator, where you go through all these trials and tribulations, all these different scenarios in life so you can learn, you can correct your past mistakes, and you can learn about new things. It's all, everything that happens to us, it's hard to believe, is for our own edification. There's no punishment per se, although it may seem like punishment. If there's something really bad happens, it's because of something bad happened in a previous life. Like when you see someone innocent and say they lived a great life, but this horrible thing's happening to them. Well, most probably, they've asked for that, and when they were planning out their life in heaven, because they want to atone for something they did incorrect before, and that the weight of doing bad things is just really, as the spirits say, we are our own harsh judges. We don't like the weight of thinking of when we've done things wrong. And I think back in this life, things I've done wrong. I just, oh, I can't believe I did that. What an idiot, right? And I don't like thinking that way. I don't like the fact that I did that, I should say. But as the spirit Joanna Downs says, don't over agonize over what you did wrong. Just analyze it and don't do it again. Put that problem as a arrow in your quiver, take it out, put it in the bow, and shoot it out behind you, and keep moving forward. And that's what one should do. Okay, so the spirit realm will tell you a lot of these things. It's kind of a compilation of the other 14 books I've written. It puts everything in perspective. I think if you're just new to Spiritism, I would actually go for my Spiritism 101. And read the Spirits book, which of course you can get on PDF also. And just type in Allan Kardec space PDF. You'll find all his books on PDF. Here's a question from Katira. In a metaphysical class I was taking, I asked, is there such thing as a premature death? The instructor, Reverend, said, no. I believe that is based on communication with the other side. Many metaphysicians have different opinions. So I would say The answer is mostly no, but suicide is a premature death. Suicide is leaving the class early, leaving the school before the bell has rang. And what happens with suicides is they have, not all the time, there's exceptions for those poor people who are driven to suicide by obsessive spirits or extreme cruelty on earth. There are exceptions. I won't say that right now. But for those who just gave up and found no other way out of the problems of usually of their own making, they will have to stay in the lower zones until the time of their appointed death, of their planned death. So those are premature deaths. Because what that reverend was implying is that there's perfect predestination or predetermination, which is every choice you make was predetermined and was known about. What that says is we have no free will, but the spirits have been very explicit. We have free will. Now, depending on the level of planet you're on, you have more free will. But the planet we're on, which is the planet of atonement, our free will is really, it's like we're going to have to go through these trials and tribulations. We kind of plan them out beforehand, but when we're on the physical earth, they're kind of set. But our choices within those trials and tribulations and how we want to learn and how we react is all up to us. So there's no such thing as complete predestination. We have choices, we have free will. And then Katira says, I agree with the suicide being a premature death. And some others too, babies with SIDS. And that I'm not sure about. That's a good point. And it may be accidental or it may be on purpose. I'm not sure. That I don't know. So anyway, it's been fascinating. And remember, I live stream on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays. And on Mondays, I have just a whole hour of Q&A. I've usually lately been going over. I have excellent questions like I've had today. So any of my live streams, please feel free to ask questions. I love them. The more we can talk to people about Spiritism, the more we can see that it's really all about love and following the golden rule, but also exposing to you what physical life is in relation to the spirit life, to your immortal life, which is your real life. This is your fake life, your summer camp life that you'll go back home, right? It won't last that long. It may seem long to us here on earth because we're very impatient, but it will be very fast. Okay, I want to say